Hello, this is Sophie Lawson from sophielawson.com, and this is episode 231 of the Sophie Art podcast, which is a little podcast I do about the art and tings with me co-host lilDENNiS. And lilDENNiS and Kitty are here today, and what we're doing on this one is we're going to be talking about the past month at art class. So let's get into this one. So lilDENNiS has let us in, and now we've got some kitty kisses. So what we do on these is, well, you'll be able to find show notes and everything for some of the things I talk about on this podcast at sophielawson.com, and it's also on YouTube as a video, and I'll put links and everything in the description and things. But this month at art class I did some painting, which I don't do much painting, but I used this thing called Ranson's. It's a big brush, a big paintbrush. So I'm going to be talking about that. It is the Ranson Hake, and this is a large one. You can get like different size ones of these. So also I've got very big watercolour paper. So if you're watching this on the video, I'm not sure how it's going to fit on the screen, but there's a lot of stuff to go over this past month. So lilDENNiS and Kitty are sitting comfortably. I hope you are as well. And what I'm going to do is, we'll start with this one. So this is for the month of, August. Yeah, we're into September now already. So I'll put links for the previous episodes of this. And what we do is we go to art class and we've got it's normally life models really. It's normally life models and portraits. I'm not sure when we started. Yeah, it will be the first thingamajig of July, wasn't it? Here we go. Did we? Yeah, we did do that one. Because the last one we did for last month, he had his willy out, and it was a very graphic. What do you call it? Pose, my mum said. But I thought it was cool. So this first one is from the 10th of August with the model called James. James was actually sitting in his clothes. Oh yeah, he was cool. Actually, I think I might have... I'm not sure if we covered this one on the last one. But what we had a model wearing his clothes, and it was supposed to be a portrait, I think it was. But I ended up doing the whole body, because I like doing the body. And I actually like it when the model has clothes on, because I find you get a lot more interesting shapes. You get you get the folds of the fabric, but also things like shoes and stuff. So what I did was I did a quick sketch with me. I got this magic pencil which does different colours, and so I did a quick sketch with that. And what I thought to myself was, I love his shoes. So then what ended up happening was I thought I'm going to focus in and do some ballpoint pen drawings with of his shoes and stuff. So I started out doing his trainers, and then I just ended up filling the page with. So I did both of his shoes. I did his hand. I did I captured the folds on his top, his ear. And also he had a logo on his t-shirt, Logan Rock. But the main thing I got from this one was, because what he had his hands gently touching themselves, but he had his hands were almost like, for me, the focal point, and I noticed these veins. And it was the first time I'd really sort of sort of focused on veins at an art class before, and I just realised how beautiful they were. And it made me think that they were actually, for me it looked like roots from a tree. And then what happened was, I think I talked about this on one of the podcasts. I was walking around Saltram, the local woods, and I was looking at the trees, and I suddenly remembered this because the branches were also in the same sort of formation. So what it makes me think is that it's almost like that's a very universal pattern or something. Like the shape of tree roots, tree branches, and our veins are very similar. And then I don't know if you've ever seen it where they look out into space and you see like universes and stuff. Well, some of them are also, some of them actually end up looking a bit like the same thing. So you do sort of wonder, how comes everything always looks the same? This is quite interesting. So I said his hands were the main focal point, like my main interest, but when I did my finished drawing, I kept his hands as the basic shapes. So it looks a little bit like he's got boxing gloves on. But that's what I do. I start out with these big sort of, capture like the big shape, and then I normally sort of like chisel out his fingers. But for some reason on this one I kept it. But what I did capture was his little finger, because one of his fingers was gently touching his arm. And I just thought how beautiful that looked. So also he had very big muscles, but what I've noticed I do is if I'm drawing a bloke, I normally end up actually exaggerating his muscles a bit. I don't know why that is. Maybe because I think blokes are supposed to be muscular or something. But he was cool, I liked him. I hope we have him again as a model. I liked him. Then the next one, 17th of August, this was Stuart. So 2 blokes in a row. Last night we had a female model, which is the first female life model we've had. Actually, no, it's the second. So it's the second in about, 6 months or something? 4 or 5 months. But again, I love the quick poses. What I like about the quick poses is you've sort of got to look at it. You've got to look at the pose and try to sort of capture it in one stroke. And I just enjoy it. I love it. So what I did was I captured his pose, and then I think this was a 5-minute one, so I still had enough time left. I do like the shapes of feet, so I started sort of trying to capture his feet on their own, and then also his face. And then we went into, I think this was the main, we did one little quick pose where he was standing up, and then we went into the main one where he was sitting down. So for this one I actually changed seats, because I thought to myself, well, what happened was I think it was Mike, like the leader of the art class, he actually said to me, you always sit in the same seat. So what I did was I thought, right, next week I'm going to sit in a different seat. So I moved to a different location. So for this one I actually had his back. So I started out doing another quick sketch, and I did 2. Oh no, this must have been another quick sketch. Yeah, this was another quick sketch. So I did 2 little quick sketches here. I did one with a brush pen and one with my other thing. But what I liked about this was I liked the shape of his head from behind. That's one of the cool things about blokes is, because they've normally got short hair, you can really see the shape of the head. Whereas when you're drawing a female, the hair is more like the sort of the hair is like the shape of the head, whereas a bloke, the head is the shape of the head. Also, he had his bum. This was a cool angle though. I like this one. What I really liked about this one was he was sitting on a chair, and I liked the way the chair sort of balanced with his body. I think they should use more props when they're doing life drawing, because props are cool. And then this was the final pose. Yeah, so what we had was he was lying down for the final pose. That's me hitting the tripod. So he was lying down, and I thought to myself, oh, this is going to be hard, because what I find is when you've got a model lying down, it's very hard to get the size of the leg, because what happens is you're looking at it, you draw the leg, and you're convinced that it's wrong. You're convinced that what you've drawn is wrong, that it's too long or too short, but it's actually right, but it doesn't look right. It's one of those things where your mind sort of messes your head, because your mind is saying that's wrong, but your eyes are saying it's not, it's right. So this is that thing where you've got to sort of trust yourself. It's almost like your mind wants to make you think you're doing it wrong. This is quite weird. So I've also started trying to do faces a bit more, because I tend to not do the faces at life drawing class, because I find that when I draw the face, I find it actually distracts from the overall pose. I prefer the drawing to focus on the shape of the body, not the sort of face. But for the quick pose, I noticed that what I noticed was the shadows were going to be brilliant on this one, because of the position I was sitting in, the light was creating really nice shadows. And I think I talked about this before in a previous podcast, one of these art class ones. What happens is, because you're doing it from 7 till 9 at night, it starts out light and it gets darker, and as it gets darker, the spotlight they've got becomes more and more like the focus of the lighting. So what happens is, you start getting all these shapes on the body, but the thing is, it's constantly moving. So it's like a sort of it's a challenge, but it's fun. I like it. Yeah, but I could tell that there were going to be really beautiful shapes on him. I think that was yeah, this is it. So what I did was, I did my first one with a pencil. I've noticed something here. When I drew his foot, I've sort of drawn his foot as if it looks a bit like a sort of a frog's. It looks like a frog or a seagull's foot. So it looks like he's got a sort of a webbed foot. This is quite weird. Yeah, but I remember this. Well, the first thing is I love the hairy body. He's got a hairy body, and I really enjoyed drawing his hair. That's another thing you don't get on the female body. Well, we did once, a few years ago, we had a female life drawing model, and she actually had hairy legs. And I thought, oh, this is cool. Because again, it's one of those things where, like, society says females have to have smooth skin or something. But she was like saying, well, no, I'm proud of my hairy legs. So I sort of felt quite, I felt really sort of happy when she had these hairy legs. Reminds me of a girl at school as well. There was a girl at school who had really hairy legs, like proper, sort of like monkey legs. But everyone always used to take like the mick out of her. I always remembered thinking, it was a bit like she was like me in reverse, because I had hairy legs, but I wanted the smooth legs. What happened with this one though was, as I was drawing him with the pencils, because the shapes on his body were so cool, I thought, what I'm going to do is, right at the end, when the lighting is the most extreme, I'm going to get me fine liner out, and I'm going to actually just draw his body as shadow shapes. And I thought I really enjoyed doing that, because what I did was, like, you might have had, say, 4 or 5 shadows on his legs, but I turned it into one block. So you ended up with this very sort of strange looking drawing, really. where it's just blacks and whites. I would like to do that more, because it was quite cool. I think that would have been better if I hadn't drawn the lines around his body. I'm not sure. No, I wouldn't. Because no, it's good like that, I think. But what happened was that what I did was I drew the circle for his head, and then I realised, I shouldn't have done that, because his nose, because of the angle, his nose was actually below the circle. So what's ended up happening is, because you can't erase pens, I've got to sort of keep this shape. I've got to keep that circle on his head, even though his nose is below the. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but it's an example where you can't erase when you're working with pens. So that was that one, and then I also I did even more. I did some even. What I did here was I had my I've got this what's it called? What's the colour of that? It's like a brown. It's a very sort of friendly brown fine liner. So I was like doing some sort of cross hatching type thing, but I did his hand. I drew his fingers, his foot, his face, and then bits of his body. But again, it was just I was really enjoying that one. So that was on the 17th of August. So the next week we actually did some painting. Dun dun dun! So also I'm going to go through my little sketchbook when I'm outside. When we go out, what we do is on a Saturday we go out painting around outside. So what we did was, what was this one? 4, 5, 6. This was the 24th of August. What we did was we had to use this really big paintbrush, and you wasn't allowed to do any drawing. So you had a really big paintbrush, and all you were doing was painting. So for me, this is completely sort of, I suppose, scary, because I'm all about like details and, you know, using pens and stuff. So this is using paint, which I don't use very often, and a big brush, which I never use big brushes. I always, when I go out on a Saturday doing my painting, I use one of the smallest brushes you could ever imagine. So I'm used to using this tiny little brush, and we had to use this massive one. So, but I'll tell you something, I enjoyed this so much. One of the things that Mike said, because Mike was running the class, he made a little chart on the board, and it says order of painting. You start further away and you finish closest, and then the paint to water ratio. So you start with the thinnest, you go to the thickest. So that's how you create the make the background look like it's sort of out of focus. So that's how you sort of create the depth. And then the brushes, he says largest to smallest, because we did use a tiny brush right at the end to do a few little details. So I wrote that down because I thought I liked that. He was also talking about warms and cools and warms, how they like sort of go forward and backwards and stuff. My biggest challenge on this one though was the paints I was using. Yeah, we did 2 on this one. So what we had was, he had a painting. No, he didn't. He had one of his. What he did was he had done a painting himself down at Saltram, like before. I don't know if it was a year ago or something, but he had that paint. He had his own painting up on like an easel, and he had a piece of paper, and he was sort of copying his painting, and we had to go through it as he went through it. So the first thing is, I did way too much blue at the start. So what's happened is the whole thing has actually gone too blue because of that. it's one of these things you only learn it by doing it. And the other thing was the paper I was using was really not very good quality, so it's created like a texture on the paper. So this is the thing. It's almost like you have to make the mistakes to learn. So in the future, much lighter when I start it, and also get better paper. But the biggest challenges for this one for me was actually my sort of setup, like the tools I was using, which again, it goes into that thing of, because I don't do much painting, I haven't really got the right tools. So I was using this massive brush and a tiny little mixing palette, so it just really didn't work properly. I was trying to get this is the funniest thing ever, I was using this tiny little Winsor Newton watercolour travel palette thing with these tiny little blocks of colour, and the thing was I was trying to get the colour from that on my brush. It didn't work really very well. But I also had these other things, these tubes of paint, but I didn't have any brown. That was the thing. So I was trying to use the brown from my travel palette, but what it was Mike said, look, if you need any colours, just ask. But for some reason, everyone was afraid to say, and I think it was a bit like a social anxiety thing. I think everyone was a bit afraid to sort of ask for the paints. So what ended up happening was, a lot of us were sort of struggling with the paints, when we should have just said to Mike, can I have a paint? Can I have the brown, please? But I think what it was because you had to sort of speak in front of everyone. So I know for me, I was too nervous. So again, it's this sort of social anxiety thing. But this also goes into last night. So last night, what happened last night was, we were doing the life drawing, the model was posing, and I didn't like the position of the pose. So then they'd set the model up, and I was talking to Jenny next to me, and I said, what do you think of this one? And she said, oh, it's going to be a challenge, this. And I said, oh yeah, I'm thinking I want to sit on the other side. So I was actually thinking about moving seats. And now what happened is, I don't know if you've ever had this, when you're in a room with a load of people, you're talking to somebody, you sort of almost forget that everyone else can hear you. So when I said, oh, I think I want to sit on the other side of the room, Mike's obviously heard me, and he said, you got to speak up. If I asked everyone if they were happy with the pose. So he actually ended up moving the model slightly, so we had a much better pose. But I thought to myself, this was another sort of thing where I should have spoke up for myself. Because there's another bloke there called Stuart, and he actually did speak up, because he wasn't happy with something, so he got up and started moving the model around and stuff. So there is a big social part of art class, which is why I like it, because it's sort of, I'm not just testing myself with my art, you also like testing yourself with social stuff. So that was that one. So what we did was, we had the landscape, we had some bushes, a tree, and some little seagulls in the sky, and that was it. My main takeaway from this was how hard it was, but how fun it was. And I got to a point where I realised you don't have to worry about how good it is. That will come in time. Even Mike said himself, when he started doing it, he wasn't happy with it. And now he's really good at it, using these big brushes. And then what happened was, after that, we did another one, which was a different pose, a different landscape. But the first one, what we did on the first one was, Mike would like say draw the landscape, the background, and then we had to do it. Then Mike would draw like the trees, we had to do it. So as Mike did it, we did it like that. But this technique required the paper to be wet. And what he said was, because we were constantly stopping and stuff, the paper was drying up, so he wasn't really able to do his technique. So what he said was, on the second one, he's actually going to do it the way he normally does it. So, and he said, you can paint along if you want to. So I thought, I'm going to. But I soon realised it was actually going to be better to just sit and watch Mike do it. So my second painting, I sort of started it. I did like the first couple layers of it, but then I just left it. But what I'll do is, if you go to in the show notes, I'll put a link. Well, actually, what I'll do is, in the show notes, I'll put a photo of Mike's painting, the finished one he did, because it is absolutely beautiful. It is. It's cool. So, like I said, it's quite amazing how you can learn a lot by like doing it yourself, but you can learn a lot as well just by watching someone do it. There's two different types of learning there. So what happened then was, once I'd done that, I said to myself, next time we go out, plein air painting. So the Saturday after this art class, I said to myself, I'm going to take my paintbrush with me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually practice. So what I did was, I started playing around with the big brushes. So I'm actually already starting to sort of practice this thing, because the thing is, even though at the moment I'm not very good at it, I can see the power of these big brushes. Because you can do a painting in about, let's say, 30 minutes, and you have these brushes are so, it's a flat brush. So if you like push it, you can get like sort of textury things, which is what I did with one of the trees. So on the tree, you can get like a texture on the tree. But if you've also got it like flat, you can draw like a sort of super long straight line. So these brushes can do loads of different types of brush strokes. So I can see the power of them. So I want to get good at these. And then all that was left then was last night's art class, which was the 31st, and we had a new model, a female model called Fidela. Now she was absolutely beautiful. She was one of these people who basically could just. I felt like she was feeling the pose. You get some models who are posing, but you can tell they're not actually in the pose. She was very much in the pose. So she had a beautiful body as well, very like curvy and everything, and she had this fantastic hair as well. She had like it was like a bob, I don't know if you know the character Chie from Persona 4. She had Chie's hair, or Faith from Mirror's Edge, and I thought it was cool. So what I did, the first one, we had a pose. She had a little pose going on where she was like sitting on her knees, standing up on her knees. So I did the quick pose, and then I sort of focused in on her fingers because I thought how beautiful they were. And so I did a little like a sort of a quick sketch study of her fingers. And that was the thing about her. All night everything was just positioned really beautifully. It was almost like you felt like if you sort of say put a bit of water on her body, it would flow down her body like a beautiful sort of flowing motion. That's the thing really, her body was a bit like water, like flowing around. So she did another pose, another quick sketch. We did another 5-minute one, and this one was she was again standing on her knees, but whereas the first one it was like a side-on view, and she was sort of twisting her upper body. This one it was more she was doing the same sort of thing but at a different angle. But whereas the first one, her arms were separate from her body, so you had like the straight of her arm with the curvy of her body. The second one, her arms were actually going across her body. And again, on this one I used my brush pen, and I loved doing her hair. It was so cool. I also liked the way her feet were dangling over the edge of she was sitting on a mattress with like a a fleece on it, but her feet were like dangling over the edge of the mattress. Yeah, I liked that. It was a cool little shape. I feel like that's probably my favouriteest that's probably my favourite drawing from the last month at art class, because I just feel like I've actually captured her pose. And I also like that. I like using the brush pens for quick sketches, because you get nice textures and stuff, and you can go light and dark with it as well. We then went into the final pose. She was actually sitting. Oh, this was cool as well. What happened was, before the session, Richard, one of the other artists, he was going to have the task of posing her, but she was so good that she actually was doing the poses herself for the quick ones. But for the long ones, Richard on his phone had a load of photos, and I was looking at the photos before, and I said, oh, that's a nice one. And he actually ended up using the one that I said was quite nice. And what she was doing was she was sitting on one of her feet, and she had her arms wrapped around it, so she had one knee going up, one knee going down, and then her hands were going around her knee. So again, you just had so many beautiful shapes going on here. Yeah, I love this one, and her hair as well was just looking really nice. So I did me quick sketch, and then I did me finished drawing. And what happened on this one was, this was another one where, what it is because of the way she was sitting, her leg was looking a lot longer than it actually. No, her leg was a lot shorter than it looked. So I actually, at the start, I drew her leg way longer down here. So what ended up happening was, I got quite a long way into the drawing, and I just stopped, and I said, something's not right here. So I looked at her, and I worked out that I put her leg in the wrong place. So I actually ended up erasing the drawing, like about 30 minutes into it, and moved her leg up, because I thought, and the funny thing was, it was only one leg that was in the wrong place. The other leg was right, but I was convinced it was the other leg that was wrong, but it was actually the other one. Again, it's this sort of weird thing. As soon as I moved that leg up, I thought it felt a lot more like what I was looking at. So for this one, so many things I loved about this one. I loved the way her fingers were. She had her fingers going like interlocking with themselves, but her thumb was like, her thumbs were like gently touching each other, almost like two little creatures, sort of gently holding hands or something. And there was like a lot of love in those fingers. You also could just see her bum behind her legs, which it just created a really nice sort of, she had like a pear shape to her body. And then her feet were hidden underneath the, what's it called? Like the fleece. So again, there's an element of sort of, suppose like sexiness or something there, because her foot's underneath the fabric. It's just, everything's brilliant. What happened was, right, this was cool. I wasn't going to do anything on her face. I was going to leave it like an empty face. And then about 10 minutes before the end, she suddenly shut her eyes for about a minute. And I thought, and as I looked at her like that, I saw how beautiful her eyelashes were. And I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put her eyelashes in and leave it like that. Yeah. So what I've done was, I've got her eyelashes, but nothing else. I've got a tiny little hint of her nose, but that's it really. And there's something sort of I like the feeling that creates by just having the eyes and no mouth or nothing. But I enjoyed doing her hair. I enjoyed again capturing the shadow shapes, and then I did the thing. What I like to do is, right at the end, I like to go around the outline of the drawing with a fine liner. There's something about that I like. I don't know what it is. I like that look. There's an element of sort of manga or anime about this one. So that was the last one. Now she's a beautiful model. She's actually coming back in, I don't know if it's the end of September or the end of October, but she's coming back. We've also got another new model. I think it's 2 weeks' time. We've got another new model. So it's quite exciting. One more second. I'll go through what I did on the Saturdays. So what happens is, on a Saturday, I think we've only got 2 of these left, because it only runs during the summer. So what we do every Saturday during the summer, we all meet up and go painting outside. But I've promised myself what I'm going to do is, even when this is over, and even if it's raining and everything, every single Saturday I'm going to go out painting and stuff. Because I've thought to myself, there's been a couple times where I've gone to these things and I've sat in the wrong location on my own. Well, I'll talk about it in a minute. I was in the wrong location on my own for 2 hours, like painting, and then when I was walking home, I realised everyone else was round the corner, which was quite funny. But it made me realise you don't need to be around just because everyone else is. I don't know how to say it. In other words, I can do it on my own. Do you know what I mean? You don't need. It's almost like the other people could become like a sort of a crutch. So you say, well, because no one else is there, I'm not going to bother. But I feel like it's actually better to do it when you're on your own. So that's my little promise to myself. I can't remember. Oh yeah, I got this thing where what I do is I try to hide a seagull in the painting. When was I think this might be the first one. The first one was Mountbatten. So what I did this was another thing as well. What happened was Mike, the previous week, Mike had actually looked at one of my little sketchy painting things. What I do is I normally get a fine liner, do some like drawings, like a sketch with fine liner, and then put some colour in with the watercolour. But he actually said, you should try doing it the other way around, which is putting your painting in and then doing a little bit of detail at the end with the fine liner. But again, this is another thing that sort of scared me, because I feel like if you start with the detail, I feel a lot safer doing that. Whereas if I'm going straight in with the colour, it just doesn't feel natural to me. But I thought I'd give it a go, and I tried it, and I do actually prefer the way I've been doing it, which is starting with the fine liner, But again, I like the feeling of starting with a paint, because when you start with a paint, it pushes things backwards. Whereas when you're using the fine line all the time, everything sort of becomes flat. So I feel like there must be a way to sort of balance this out. Maybe what I could do is I could pick a focal point that I want to focus on, like say a building or a tree or something. I could start out drawing that, paint that, and then paint around it without any inking, so that way you get the best of both worlds. But this was cool. What I like about these is you're sitting there for a couple of hours. You're not only painting, you're sort of experiencing life, and then when you're doing your painting, that it's all coming into the painting. So like there was this group of people on a little speedboat. So as I'm painting, these people on the speedboat like zoomed off, and I sort of quickly sketched it. And then another bloke was in a sailing boat about 10 minutes later or something. I sketched that. Then there was a little seagull sitting there. I sketched him. So what you're doing is you're sort of capturing these moments in time and putting them all into the painting. So this is why I feel like it's better than a photograph. A photograph only captures one moment. A painting captures multiple moments. One of the best things about this location is, well, the first thing is like you got the rockiness, you got loads of water, and you've also got a beautiful backdrop. And my favourite thing is there's this building which is like hidden into the grass. Somebody actually left a comment on one of my videos because I did a walk and talk around this location, and they said a lot of these buildings are actually ammo depots and stuff like that. So these little buildings were probably involved in some war in the past. Probably like, shooting ships and stuff. Oh, this was a funny one as well. So the next one we went down to... Oh no, was this the same? I don't think that was somewhere else, I think. I feel like that was Devil's Point. No, it wasn't. That was Mountbatten. Yeah, this one I was sat on the pier. So then what happened then was I was sat on the pier on my own. So I thought, right, I'm going to go and find everyone else. So I started walking back, and as I was walking back, I noticed I was walking along the edge of the pier, looking down at the rocks, and I just thought how beautiful the rocks were, because they were all grey, but they had like a little hint of like orange in them. It was a beautiful combination. So I tried to capture it, but I didn't really do a very good job of it. But what I was doing was I was sitting on the edge of the pier with my foot, and I actually like sketched my foot. Now what's brilliant is, as I was sitting there, a crow or a blackbird it sat right in front of me on the rock for about 5 minutes. It just sat there like watching me. So I drew him in as well. And then what happened then was, again, I was walking to find everyone else, and a scene caught my attention, because there was a bunch of kids. What it was, you were right at the end of like the cliff edge sort of thing, or like the beach, but it was a rocky beach. So you had like the rocky beach, loads of water, but the sun was behind me, and everyone was in like a silhouette. So you had these 3 little kids playing in the rocks, and there was just something about it. I thought that looks so cool, so I like quickly captured it. I got it in my brown fine liner again. But I liked the way those little people were sort of they were sort of part of the rock somehow. Yeah, and then what happened was I tried to find everyone else, and I spent about 20 minutes walking around Mountbatten. And what happened is, everyone else was on the other side of because Mountbatten is quite big. They were all on the other side of it, but when I tried to go over there, the path was blocked because there had been a landslide, so you couldn't get down onto the beach that way. So I walked all the way the other way. You still couldn't get down there, and I just thought, I'm going to go home. But it turns out there were other people who couldn't get down there either. So there was quite a few of us down there, but we were all sort of separated that day. So this was the first time I never saw anyone. I was all on my own on that one. And then the next week, we went to another place. Again, this is a location that I've never been to before. And I went onto Google, put the location in, and it showed me this place. So I went down there, I sat down and started sketching. I got there quite early, and then what happened was I got so into me painting, I sort of lost track of time. And then by the time I realised what time it was time to go home. So I started walking home, and as I walked home, I realised everyone else was sat out about 5 minutes round the corner. Which is quite funny. So I did end up talking to everyone, and I saw everyone else's paintings. I just thought, So in a weird way, it was good and bad. It was good that I sat there because I found this beautiful location where you had like a stone wall with like loads of trees and stuff, but it felt very sort of magical, this place. And then you were right next to a busy road as well. So you still had like life, like humans over here, but you had all this nature here. So I liked that. But the location that everyone else was sat in was so cool because you had like a massive sort of mansion type thing, and you had like stone railings, trees. So I could tell that you could have got a nice composition over there. But I'm glad that I sat here as well because I like this place. So what I did, I thought I'm going to try some new stuff here. So I got these pens, which are they're watercolour brush pens. But I'd forgotten that they were watercolour. So I did me drawing with these brush pens. And I suddenly, as I was sort of putting them back into my pencil case, I suddenly realised that they were watercolour. So I got my brush out. I got my watercolour brush out, my little one, and I started putting some water on it, and I liked it. But the thing is, because I didn't realise that they were watercolour, I put way too much ink on the paper, so it's created a very dark, sort of highly saturated colour palette, which isn't very pleasing for me. But again, I can see that these have got potential, because there's areas where it's lighter. So I've never realised that you could get watercolour brush pens. So this is something I want to try again. But what happened was I thought I'm going to do this again because I was so in love with this location. You had like the stone wall, a little doorway, loads of green in the background, a hint of humans on the right, and this beautiful tree, this big tree with like branches overlapping themselves. So you had like loads of different sort of textures and stuff going on here. So I did it again with me fine liner, like me ink sketch with some watercolours. And I actually do prefer that one, the second one. But this is one of those locations I would like to go back to in, say, a few years' time, where I'm a lot better, especially if I got good with these big brushes. I'd love to go there and do a beautiful painting of this place. What I'd probably do is, though, I'd probably cut out the human bit and keep it. I'll keep it all. I don't know though, because you've got this like metal. What's it called? Metal fence. And there's something about that is actually quite a nice. It almost like brings balance to the to the painting. I think what it is because the fence is sort of going inwards, it sort of pushes you into the painting or something. That's what I'm thinking. And then, well, last week, here we go, last week, this was the 27th of August. Yeah, we went down to Embankment Road. Again, this was brilliant. What we had here was, alright, listen to this, how cool this is. So I thought to myself, I'm going to take my big sketchbook and I'm going to do some watercolour in with me big paintbrush. But what you need to do is, because you've got to get water on it, Mike says it's best to have the paper sort of at an angle so that the water dripples down the page. But as I was walking there, I thought, oh no, because I was going to take something with me to lean on it. And I thought, oh no, I forgot that. When I got there, on the beach was this massive log, like a big tree trunk type thing, and it was perfect. So I picked it up, and I made like a little. It's almost like I made like a little art desk. So I was sitting on the edge of the cliff, the edge of the bank, with this log with all my paint supplies on it. I had my paintbrush. It was as if this location was set up for me. It was absolutely brilliant. I'll put a photo in. Again, I'll put a photo on the show notes because it was just so cool. I took a photo of it, but it really was like somebody put that there for me. So I sat there and I painted, and I thought, right, my intention was to use the big brush, but I thought I'm going to start out doing a little one with my inks, just so that I've at least got that out of my system, sort of thing. And then I thought that might make me sort of a bit more carefree with the big one. So what you had here was, again, you had this beautiful thing going on where you had humans in their cars with nature. And there's something about that I like. So I was sat on the edge of this bank looking at a bridge, like a big bridge that goes a motorway. I don't know what they call it. Basically a road with cars on it, and it's going across the river. So you had all these boats in there. You had like some of the sand. You had in the background fields. So I've noticed on here, I've already started actually putting the fields in without fine liners on them. I don't remember doing that, but I must have like remembered without thinking about it. Again, we had some canoers going on here, so there was some people in their canoe. Oh, what it is it's a rowers. There's a rowing club just down here. Over there somewhere, about 5-minute walk down there, there's a rowing club. So all day we had these rowers going back and forth. Yeah, so I thought I'm going to capture one of those. Because I liked the way they were syncing up as they rowed. It was cool. But the other thing was we had these cars going across the bridge. So I thought, right, I'm going to capture some of those and make them pop with colour. We had a little building as well, and I had this thing happen again where, as I'm sitting there painting, a little bird comes and sits on the beach, and again he sat there for about 3 or 4 minutes just watching me. I don't know what it is about painting, but birds seem to sort of birds are fascinated with you. I don't know if you've noticed this. If you're ever just sitting in nature doing nothing, birds will start sort of watching you as if it's almost as if they're looking at you thinking they're one of us. Once I'd done that, look, what happened was, that was another thing that's funny as well. I'm sitting there painting and I suddenly heard crack. So I looked around to my left, and what happened was there was a blackbird. He was picking up, what are they called? What are those things? Oysters, is it? basically he had like a shell with a creature in it, and what he was doing was he was flying up in the air, dropping this shell on the ground, trying to open it up to get the little creature out to eat it. So I had this crack. I turned around and he's sitting there, and he had a look on his face as if, honestly, he looked like he was thinking it wasn't me, as if he'd got caught. I also did some little quick sketches. I did a little quick sketch of a bloke rowing, because I wanted to sort of. What happened was they had their legs up in like a triangle, and every time they put their legs up in a triangle, the row that they were holding, it was super long, and but you also had the curviness of their back. So I thought, oh, I love this. The shapes going on. They had a hat on as well. I also liked the shapes of the rocks. Like the edge of the bank was rocky, and I just thought I liked that. And then also we had some little flowers. Yeah, it's quite interesting when you look at these, because you sort of remember the day. It's quite nice. But this was the first thing I did, and there was loads of water there. By the time I'd left, there was pretty much no water left. All the water had subsided. And also I got Mike. Mike was sitting on the beach painting with his easel. I got him in the painting. So the first thing I did, I tried to use this big brush to do the thing, and it just didn't work. It really didn't work. The thing is, Mike's one of these people who you watch him, he makes it look so easy, you think, I can do that. And then when you try to do it, it's really hard. But I'm going to keep trying because it is cool. So what I did on this was, I started out doing the big brush. I was struggling so much, I ended up using a little brush. So I sort of combined the big brush with little brushes for details. And I do like the thing. I like the way it's almost like you know when you're sat on a train, you're looking out the window and everything's just like zooming by. It's sort of like that. So it's got a sort of it's got quite a sort of a different feeling to it, this one. I've got the little seagulls in. Oh, I saw something really cool yesterday. I was sitting eating an apple just before art class, and I could hear birds like making a load of noise in the sky. When I looked up, there was a bunch of pigeons flying around with a seagull. Now I've never ever, and they were there for about, they were there for about a minute in the sky, like chasing each other, but you could tell they were playing, because like one was going in front of, like the seagull was in front of the pigeons, then the pigeons would go in front of the seagull, but they were all sort of staying in formation. But I thought, how cool is that? You've got two different types of birds playing with each other. Because I've never ever seen pigeons and seagulls flying together in the sky. It's normally always a bunch of seagulls playing or a bunch of pigeons. So that was one of those moments I thought, oh, I love. It was like one of the best things I saw yesterday, that was. And then the last thing I did was, basically I tried to do what I normally do, but with my bigger brush, and I also did it on a bigger bit of paper. But by this time, what had happened was the water had sort of gone out, so now you had a load of, all of a sudden, it was cool though, all of a sudden you had stuff in the water that was there, but you couldn't see it. So like, whereas before it was just water, you now had like, it was some sort of, I would say it's part of a shipwreck or something. Something was sticking out of the water. You also had like buoys, those red buoy things that had obviously got stuck in the mud, so they were no longer floating. All the boats that were before were like floating in the water were now leaning over in the water. And also you had loads of seagulls sitting like right on the edge of the water. I think my favourite thing about this final one I did was getting Mike in it. So I like that. But it's very interesting, like sort of seeing how quickly the water goes out. And that's it for this month at art class. What was I think my favourite plein air painting. I don't know, I think it was that one actually from last week. The one with the cars on it. I think that's my favourite from that. I think my favourite thing from like life drawing class was one of my quick sketches from last night. So that's it for that. Also, I took this is another thing, like you live and learn. Whereas before I was trying to mix my paints on this little palette, what I did was I got a plate. I found a plate in my drawer and I used that for mixing my paints. So it'll do for the moment. It's china. Really it'd be better to have a plastic one. So I'm going to get a plastic one in the future, but for the moment I've got this plate. And I also took me tubes of paint with me as well. It's cool. But I hope you enjoyed that. That was this month at art class. And well, lilDENNiS has said it's game over, sunshine. What we're going to do, the next one is going to be... The next one's going to be the final couple of plein air painting sessions with the group, and then after that it'll be I can go wherever I want then. So the good thing about that is, if I wanted to go and say paint like buildings, that's what I mean, I could do anything. So when I'm on my own I could go wherever I want, and if it's raining like really hammering down, I'm going to have to be quite creative to find locations undercover. But I think it'll be interesting as well to watch nature changing, because what will happen is if you come back to this location in a few months' time, all the trees are going to be just like branches. So it's going to be quite interesting actually watching the world change over the next few months. But I hope you enjoyed that. All that's left is this week's inspirational quote. What can we have for this week's inspirational quote? I don't know. This week's inspirational quote. I can't think of anything. I'm going to go and get my book, see if I can find something. Hey, I know what I got. I got the Bible up here. I picked up a Bible in the second-hand shop for 33p. It's a beautiful Bible as well. It's got like a leather cover. Don't you love the sound of paper? So what I'm going to do is lilDENNiS is going to pick a page and we'll find a quote on that page. Here we go. Kings. lilDENNiS, he's a king. He's gone to the page of kings. Right, lilDENNiS said down here. This week's inspirational quote is, I am a man of God. Let fire come down from heaven and consume you in your 50. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed him. No. It said, if I am a man of God. So this bloke, whoever this bloke is, he doesn't quite trust that he's a man of God. No, I don't like that one, lilDENNiS. Pick another one. Teach me of your paths. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. Make me to know your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. No, we're not finding anything in here. The plot to kill Jesus? Who is the greatest? I love that really thin paper that you get in Bibles, and it's quite cool. You feel like you could you feel like if you get a bit of water on that, it's gonna disintegrate. I wonder how long this paper will last. Oh, this week's inspirational quote. I found it. The truth will set you free. This week's inspirational quote from the Bible. The truth will set you free. Look, lilDENNiS got a hat on. Hello.